I'm Richard Chen, 68 years old. And for 40 years, my wife thought I was just another white guy who couldn't tell the difference between sushi and sashimi. What she didn't know was that I'd spent 3 years in Osaka during my Navy service, spoke fluent Japanese, and understood every single word when her business colleague, Tanaka-san, visited our home for dinner. When I heard what he said about me that night, sitting right across the table while they both smiled at my face, my world shattered. But here's what neither of them knew. Patience and preparation beat arrogance every single time. What I did next didn't just expose them. It destroyed everything they'd built together. Before I tell you exactly how I dismantled their lives piece by piece, please subscribe to my channel and let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. Stories like this need to be shared because betrayal hiding behind a language barrier is more common than you think, and someone watching this might be living the same nightmare right now without even knowing it. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Richard Chen, and yes, the last name throws people off. My grandfather was Chinese, immigrated through Angel Island in 1923, married my Irish grandmother in San Francisco, and I came out looking more O'Connor than Chen. Pale skin, blue eyes, light brown hair going silver now. People see me and think generic white guy, maybe some European mix. They never guess Asian heritage, and I'd never corrected anyone about it. Why would I? I'm American. That's all that matters. But that heritage meant something to my grandfather. When I joined the Navy at 19, fresh out of high school in 1975, he pulled me aside. "Richard," he said in his accented English, "you're going to see the world. Learn languages. Language is power. Most men are deaf and blind because they only speak one tongue." I didn't understand what he meant then. I do now. The Navy stationed me in Yokosuka, Japan, just south of Tokyo. 3 years, 1976 to 1979. Most guys spent their time drinking in bars and chasing women. I spent mine in language classes. Started as a way to kill time, became an obsession. The Japanese language is like a puzzle, complex, layered, full of subtle meanings that change based on context and relationship. I loved it. By year 2, I was fluent. Not tourist fluent, actually fluent. I could read technical manuals, understand naval communications, follow rapid conversations between native speakers. My commanding officer even used me as an unofficial translator during joint operations. When I left Japan in 1979, I could pass for a native speaker on the phone. My accent was that good. But when I came home to California and started my career in pharmaceutical sales, I never mentioned it. Why would I? It wasn't relevant. I was calling on doctors, selling medication, building relationships in English. The Japanese language skills sat in my back pocket and used, slowly gathering dust in my memory. Then I met Caroline in 1984. She was 25, working as a paralegal, beautiful and ambitious. I was 29, finally making good money, ready to settle down. We married 6 months later. Small wedding, just family and close friends. My grandfather attended, saw how happy I was, and gave me one piece of advice. Never stop learning, Richard. Never stop paying attention. Caroline and I built a good life. I stayed in pharmaceutical sales, worked my way up to regional manager. She went to law school part-time, graduated, joined a corporate firm. We bought a house in Pasadena in 1987, a beautiful craftsman with a big front porch and a yard for the kids we planned to have. Except the kids never came. 5 years of trying, 3 rounds of IVF, and finally the acceptance that it wasn't going to happen. That was hard on both of us, but especially Caroline. She threw herself into work, made partner at 40, and became one of the top international corporate attorneys in Los Angeles. Her specialty? Japanese business law. She'd taken a few Japanese language classes in law school, enough to read contracts with a dictionary and stumble through basic business phrases. She wasn't fluent, not even close, but she knew enough to impress American clients who needed someone to navigate Japanese corporate culture. That's how she met Kenji Tanaka. Tanaka-san was a corporate attorney from Tokyo, working for Mitsui Corporation's Los Angeles office. He'd been in the U.S. for 5 years, spoke perfect English with a slight British accent from his time at Oxford, and was, by all accounts, very good at his job. He was 52 years old, married with 2 adult children back in Japan, and presented himself as the epitome of Japanese professionalism. Caroline started working with him 3 years ago on a major acquisition deal. Mitsui was buying a California tech company, lots of complex legal work, months of negotiations. She came home talking about how brilliant Tanaka-san was, how respectful, how he treated her like an equal despite Japan's reputation for sexism in business. He's not like the stereotypes, she told me one night over dinner. He actually listens to my opinions, values them. It's refreshing after dealing with American men who talk over me in meetings. I should have heard the warning bells then, but I trusted my wife. 40 years of marriage, no prior issues, and she'd never given me any reason to doubt her. So I nodded and smiled, and said I was glad she had a good working relationship with her colleague. The dinner invitation came 6 months ago. Caroline asked if Tanaka-san could come to our house for a home-cooked meal. He's been so helpful with this new contract, she explained. He's far from home, his family is in Tokyo, and I thought it would be a nice gesture. Show him some American hospitality. Of course I said yes. Why wouldn't I? I was the supportive husband. Caroline was excited, already planning the menu. I'll make that beef Wellington you love, she said. And I've been practicing my Japanese phrases. I want to impress him with my pronunciation. The night of the dinner was a Saturday in late April. I remember because the jacaranda trees were blooming, purple flowers covering our front yard. Caroline had been preparing all day, cooking, setting the table with our good china, arranging flowers in the dining room. She wore a navy blue dress I'd bought her for Christmas, pearls, heels. More dressed up than usual for a work colleague. Tanaka-san arrived at 7 p.m. sharp. He was exactly what I expected from Caroline's descriptions. Late 50s, graying hair, expensive suit even on a weekend, wire-rimmed glasses, and an air of controlled formality. He bowed slightly when I opened the door, handed me a bottle of sake as a gift, and spoke in accented but excellent English. Mr. Chen, thank you so much for inviting me to your beautiful home. Your wife has told me so much about you. Please, call me Richard, I said, shaking his hand. Come in. Caroline's just finishing up in the kitchen. We made small talk in the living room. He admired our furniture, asked about the Navy photos on the wall from my service, commented on the California weather compared to Tokyo's humidity. He was charming, professional, perfectly appropriate. I had absolutely no reason to dislike him. Caroline emerged from the kitchen, her face bright with that excitement she got when entertaining. Tanaka-san, welcome. Richard, can you pour the wine while I bring out the appetizers? Dinner started normally. We ate, we talked. Caroline asked Tanaka-san about his family in Tokyo. He showed photos of his grown children on his phone, proud father talking about his daughter's career and his son's recent wedding. He asked me about pharmaceutical sales, seemed genuinely interested in the American healthcare system versus Japan's. Everything was pleasant, civilized, exactly what you'd expect from a professional dinner with international colleagues. Then Caroline excused herself to get dessert from the kitchen. That's when everything changed. Tanaka-san looked at me across the table, that polite smile still on his face, and said something in Japanese. Rapid, casual Japanese. The kind you use with people who don't understand you. The kind you use when you think you're speaking a secret language. Baka na yatsuda, and what a stupid man. I kept my face neutral, took a sip of wine, said nothing. He continued, speaking to himself, but loud enough for me to hear clearly, switching between Japanese and English in that way bilingual people do when they're being careless. Kanabaka to Kekenshite, Kanojo wa kawasoda. Poor her, married to such an idiot. He has no idea what's happening right under his nose. Doesn't even notice how she looks at me. Americans are so oblivious. My hand tightened on the wine glass. I kept my face relaxed, slightly bored, the expression of a man who doesn't understand a word being said. He laughed softly, shaking his head. Or tachi ga, sur o yet I are you ida, kerwa nani emoshiranai. He knows nothing while we're doing it. 2 years now, and he suspects nothing. She said he's too trusting, too simple. She was right. 2 years. The words hit me like a physical blow. 2 years they'd been having an affair, and I'd suspected nothing. I'd been the fool, the trusting husband, the simple American man who couldn't see what was happening in his own marriage. Tanaka-san poured himself more wine, completely comfortable now, enjoying his private joke. Koreaga, Seigo no kainai naru to kanojo wa ita. She said this would be the last time. She wants to end it, but I'm not ready. Maybe I'll convince her tonight, after the stupid husband goes to bed. She likes it when I speak Japanese to her. Makes her feel sophisticated. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to grab him by his expensive tie and throw him out of my house. But I didn't. Something my grandfather taught me came back. When your enemy thinks you're weak, let them think it. Weak men are underestimated. Underestimated men win. So I sat there, pretending to be the Bakanai Yatsu, the stupid man, while my wife's lover insulted me in a language he thought I couldn't understand. Caroline returned with dessert, her homemade apple pie, smiling and happy. She served us both, sat down, and said something in her broken, textbook Japanese, Dizato, Obudozo. Please enjoy the dessert. Tanaka-san smiled at her, replied in English. Your Japanese is improving, Caroline-san. Very impressive. Then he looked at me and said in Japanese, Kanojo no Nihongo wa hidoi ga, kare wa sono chigai, mo wakaranai. Her Japanese is terrible, but he can't even tell the difference. They both smiled at me. I smiled back, the oblivious husband, and took a bite of pie. The dinner ended an hour later. Tanaka-san thanked us both, bowed, told Caroline he'd see her Monday at the office, and I walked him to the door like the gracious host. After he left, Caroline was practically glowing. That went so well, she said, clearing dishes. Did you like him? He seemed nice, I said carefully. Very polite. He said such kind things about you, she lied smoothly. He thinks you're a good man. I helped her clean up, my mind racing. 2 years. They'd been having an affair for 2 years, and I'd been completely blind. How many business trips have been lies? How many late nights at the office were actually hotel rooms with Tanaka-san? How many times had she come home and kissed me with his taste still on her lips? That night, lying in bed next to my wife of 40 years, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront them immediately. I wasn't going to explode in rage or file for divorce in the heat of emotion. No, I was going to do what my grandfather taught me. I was going to pay attention. I was going to gather evidence. And I was going to make sure that when I exposed them, there would be no denying it, no explaining it away, and no escape. Caroline thought she was married to a simple, trusting man who couldn't understand Japanese. Tanaka-san thought he was having an affair with an American attorney whose husband was too stupid to notice. They were both wrong, and by the time I was finished, they would both understand exactly how wrong they'd been. The Sunday morning after that dinner, I woke up before Caroline and went for a walk. I needed to think clearly, and the house felt suffocating with her sleeping in our bed, still smelling like the perfume she'd worn to impress her lover. I walked through our Pasadena neighborhood for 2 hours, my mind working through the problem like I was back in the Navy planning a complex operation. Because that's exactly what this was, an operation. And the first rule of any successful operation is intelligence gathering. I needed to know everything. First question, how extensive was this affair? Tanaka-san said 2 years, but was that accurate? When did it start? Where did they meet? How often? What was the pattern? Second question, who else knew? Did anyone at Caroline's firm suspect? Did Tanaka-san's company know? Were there other people covering for them, enabling them? Third question, what was my end goal? Did I want revenge? Did I want divorce? Did I want to salvage the marriage? At 68 years old, after 40 years together, what did I actually want from this nightmare? By the time I returned home, I decided on a course of action. I would document everything, gather irrefutable evidence, and then decide on consequences once I knew the full scope of the betrayal. But I would do it all quietly, carefully, without tipping my hand. Caroline was making coffee when I walked in. Nice walk, she asked. Beautiful morning, I said. Clear head now. She smiled at me, completely unaware. I'm so glad last night went well. Tanaka-san sent me a text this morning. He had a wonderful time. My stomach turned. That's nice. He's going back to Tokyo for a few weeks, she continued. Family obligations. But he'll be back in June for the next phase of the Mitsui deal. June was 6 weeks away. That gave me time. That afternoon, while Caroline was at yoga, I went down to our home office and started my investigation. I'd never been the type to snoop through my wife's things, but circumstances had changed. Trust had been shattered. I needed to know the truth. Her laptop was password protected, but I knew the password. It was our anniversary date. The irony wasn't lost on me. I opened her email and started reading. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. The affair hadn't started 2 years ago. It had started 3 years ago, shortly after Caroline and Tanaka-san first met on that Mitsui acquisition deal. And it wasn't just a physical affair. It was emotional, intense, and deeply planned. There were hundreds of emails between them, not the work-related ones that appeared in her professional inbox. These were in a separate Gmail account I didn't know she had, an account specifically created for their affair. The early emails were flirtatious. Tanaka-san complimenting her intelligence, her beauty, her sophistication. Caroline responding with appreciation, saying her husband didn't notice her anymore, that I was comfortable but boring, that she felt invisible in her own marriage. That hurt more than the sex. The sex I could compartmentalize as physical betrayal. But reading that she found me boring, that she felt invisible, that I'd somehow failed her so completely that she'd turned to another man. That cut deep. The emails progressed quickly. Within 3 months of that first professional meeting, they'd slept together. A business trip to San Francisco, separate rooms booked by the firm, but only one room used. Caroline wrote about it afterward. I felt alive again. Desired. Like I matter beyond just being someone's wife. 3 years of this. 3 years of hotel rooms in different cities. 3 years of lies about working late, about client dinners, about weekend conferences. 3 years of her coming home and kissing me goodnight with that same mouth that had been on him hours before. I read every single email. It took me 6 hours, reading in chronological order, watching their affair develop from flirtation to obsession. Tanaka-san wrote poetry to her in Japanese. Caroline used Google Translate to write poetry back. It was ridiculous and heartbreaking and infuriating all at once. But what stood out most was the contempt. Not just Tanaka-san's contempt for me. That was clear from dinner, but Caroline's contempt as well. She called me Richard the Reliable in her emails. Predictable Richard. Simple Richard who suspects nothing. In one email from 8 months ago, she wrote, "Sometimes I wonder if Richard would even care if he found out. He's so passive, so comfortable. I think he'd probably just shrug and suggest marriage counseling." She didn't know me at all. 40 years together, and she'd completely underestimated who I was. I found a pattern too. Tanaka-san came to Los Angeles once a month for business. He stayed at the Langham Hotel in Pasadena, 15 minutes from our house. Caroline would claim late work nights, leave the house at 6 p.m., return by midnight. Sometimes they'd meet for lunch at a sushi restaurant in Little Tokyo where nobody from their professional circles would see them. They'd gotten comfortable, sloppy, arrogant. They thought they were untouchable. That evening, I made dinner. Spaghetti, Caroline's favorite. She came home from yoga relaxed and happy, kissed my cheek, and we ate together like we'd done thousands of times before. "How was your day?" she asked. "Quiet," I said. "Watch some baseball. Read a book. You know me, predictable Richard." She laughed, not realizing I was quoting her own words back to her. "That's what I love about you. You're steady." After dinner, I cleared the dishes and made a plan. If I wanted irrefutable evidence, I needed more than emails. I needed recordings, photos, documentation that couldn't be explained away or claimed as a misunderstanding. Monday morning, I drove to a security store in Glendale. I told the salesman I was concerned about home security, wanted to install some cameras. He set me up with 3 small, discrete cameras with cloud recording, high-definition video and audio. Completely legal to record in my own home in California as long as one party consents. And I was consenting. I installed 1 camera in our home office, hidden behind books on the shelf, pointed at the desk where Caroline used her laptop. If she was on video calls with Tanaka-san, I'd capture it. The second camera went in our bedroom, hidden inside an old clock radio on my dresser. I hated putting it there in the most intimate space of our home, but I needed to know if she was calling him from our bed, if she was having phone sex while I was sleeping downstairs. The third camera was a small one that looked like a pen. I clipped it to the visor in my car. If I followed her, I wanted video evidence of where she went. For the next 2 weeks, I watched and documented. Caroline's patterns were predictable. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, she'd claim late work. I'd follow her to the Langham Hotel in Pasadena. She'd park in the structure, take the elevator up, and not return for 3 to 4 hours. I never confronted her, never led on that I knew. I just documented it. Photos of her car in the hotel garage, timestamps, video of her entering the building. The office camera caught 2 video calls between Caroline and Tanaka-san. They thought they were secure, speaking partially in Japanese, laughing about their secret. In one conversation, captured in crystal clear HD, Tanaka-san asked when she'd tell me about the affair. Why would I tell him? Caroline responded, he's happy in his ignorance. He doesn't want to know. Trust me, Kenji. Richard would rather live in comfortable denial than face any unpleasant truth. Comfortable denial. That's what she thought I was living in. The bedroom camera caught nothing explicitly sexual, thank God, but did catch phone calls. Caroline would wait until she thought I was asleep, then call Tanaka-san from our bathroom. I captured 3 of these calls. Whispered conversations, her telling him she missed him, counting down the days until he returned from Tokyo. In one call, she said, only 3 more weeks, and then we could be together again. I hate pretending with Richard. It's exhausting being married to someone so oblivious. Oblivious. Simple. Predictable. Boring. She'd assign me every negative quality that made her betrayal easier to justify. If I was boring, then of course she'd find excitement elsewhere. If I was oblivious, then of course she'd take advantage of my trust. If I was simple, then of course she'd need someone sophisticated like Tanaka-san. She'd rewritten our entire marriage in her head to make herself the victim and me the problem. By mid-May, I had everything I needed. Emails, photos, videos, recordings, timelines, hotel receipts I'd pulled from our joint credit card statements going back 3 years. 23 hotel charges at the Langham, all on nights Caroline had claimed she was working late. I had enough evidence to destroy both of them professionally and personally, but I still hadn't decided what I wanted to do with it. That decision came on May 18th, when I overheard something that changed everything. I was in the garage, organizing tools, when Caroline came home early from work. She was on her phone, speaking rapidly, upset about something. I heard her voice through the open kitchen window. Kenji, listen to me. We need to be more careful. One of the partners made a comment today about us traveling together so much. I think Patricia suspects something. A pause while Tanaka-san responded. No, I don't want to end it, but we need to be smarter. Maybe we should start meeting somewhere else, not the Langham anymore. Another pause. Of course I'm not going to tell Richard. Are you insane? He'd probably have a heart attack. The man can barely handle conflict. He'd just accept it and suggest we all have dinner together to work it out. She laughed. Actually laughed at the idea of my reaction to discovering her affair. You're right. Richard is too passive to ever do anything about it, even if he did find out. But still, let's be careful. I don't want Patricia stirring up trouble at the firm. That's when I knew what I wanted. Not just divorce. Not just exposure. I wanted them both to understand exactly how wrong they'd been about me. I wanted them to see that the simple, passive, oblivious husband was anything but, and I knew exactly how to do it. The plan came together over the next week. Tanaka-san was returning to Los Angeles on June 5th for a major presentation at Mitsui's headquarters. Caroline had mentioned it several times, excited that he'd be back. The presentation was important, something about finalizing the acquisition deal. Lots of executives attending, high stakes for both their careers. What Caroline didn't know was that I'd done some research on Mitsui Corporation. Like most major Japanese companies, they had very strict policies about employee conduct, especially regarding affairs. Japanese corporate culture values honor, loyalty, and discretion. An executive having an affair with a married colleague would be considered shameful, potentially career-ending if exposed publicly. And Tanaka-san's wife, Yuki, was from a prominent Tokyo family. Her father was a retired executive at Mitsubishi. Divorce in Japan, especially for men of Tanaka-san's generation and social standing, carried significant stigma. If his affair became public knowledge, he wouldn't just lose his marriage. He'd lose face, which in Japanese culture is sometimes worse than death. I also researched Caroline's firm, Patterson and Associates. They had a strict policy about relationships between attorneys working on the same cases. Conflicts of interest, ethical violations, potential problems with client confidentiality. If Caroline and Tanaka-san's affair was exposed, both of them could face professional consequences. Caroline might not lose her partnership, but she'd definitely lose her reputation and possibly her position handling international cases. So here's what I planned. I would expose them at the moment of their greatest professional vulnerability, in front of the people whose opinions mattered most to their careers, using the language they thought was their secret weapon. I was going to speak Japanese at Tanaka-san's presentation. The first week of June, I started preparing. I hadn't spoken Japanese conversationally in decades, but reading those emails had brought a lot back. I spent hours every day practicing, watching Japanese news, listening to business podcasts, relearning formal business Japanese that I'd never fully mastered during my Navy days. I also hired a private investigator, a retired LAPD detective named Marcus Webb. I gave him everything I collected and asked him to verify it all, make it official. I wanted a professional investigation report, something that would hold up if Caroline tried to claim I'd doctored evidence or violated her privacy illegally. Marcus delivered. He followed Caroline and Tanaka-san for 2 weeks, documented their meetings, verified the hotel visits, even got photos of them kissing in the parking garage. His report was 47 pages of detailed, time-stamped, photographic evidence. Mr. Chen, Marcus said when he handed me the report, I've been doing this for 30 years. This is one of the clearest cases of infidelity I've ever documented. I'm sorry you're going through this. Don't be sorry, I said. Just make sure this report is bulletproof. It is. You could submit this in court tomorrow and get everything you want in a divorce. I'm not planning on court, I said. At least not yet. Marcus looked at me curiously. What are you planning? I smiled. Public education. On June 4th, the day before Tanaka-san's big presentation, I did something I'd never done in 40 years of marriage. I told Caroline I wanted to attend one of her work events. She looked surprised. Really? You never want to come to work things. I know, I said, but you've talked so much about this Mitsui deal, and I've never really understood what you do. I thought it might be nice to see you in your professional element. Support my wife, you know. She hesitated. I could see her calculating, trying to figure out if this was safe, if Tanaka-san would be okay with me being there. It's a pretty boring presentation, Richard. Lots of corporate talk. You'd probably be miserable. I don't mind, I said. I'd like to see this thing you've worked on for 3 years. Meet this Tanaka-san you've mentioned so much. See what makes him such a brilliant attorney. The flattery worked. Caroline's face softened. Okay, if you really want to come, but you'll have to wear a suit. It's at Mitsui's headquarters in downtown LA. Very formal. I'll dust off my old Navy dress blues, I joked. She laughed. Your good suit will be fine. The next morning, June 5th, I put on my best charcoal suit, the one I'd bought for our 40th anniversary party. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a 68-year-old man who'd been a fool for 3 years. But that fool was about to become someone else. Caroline drove us downtown in her BMW. She was nervous, kept checking her makeup in the visor mirror, adjusting her jewelry. This presentation is really important, she said. Tanaka-san has been preparing for weeks. All the senior executives from Tokyo are flying in to watch. If this goes well, he's in line for a major promotion. That's wonderful, I said. I'm sure he'll do great. Mitsui's headquarters was an impressive building, all glass and steel, overlooking downtown LA. We checked in at security, got visitor badges, and took the elevator to the 15th floor. The conference room was massive, probably seated 50 people, with a view of the entire city. About 30 people were already there when we arrived. Japanese executives in expensive suits, American attorneys from Caroline's firm, support staff setting up the presentation equipment. Caroline introduced me to a few people, but I could tell she was distracted, looking for someone. Then Tanaka-san entered. He looked exactly as he had at our dinner 2 months ago. Impeccably dressed, professionally charming, that slight smile that said he was in complete control. He saw Caroline and his face lit up just for a moment before he remembered to look professional. "Caroline-san," he said, walking over. "Thank you for coming. And Mr. Chen, what a pleasant surprise. I didn't know you'd be joining us." I shook his hand, held his gaze. "I wouldn't miss it. Caroline has told me so much about your brilliant work. I'm looking forward to learning from you." Something flickered in his eyes. Confusion, maybe, or concern that I was there when I wasn't supposed to be. But he recovered quickly, smiled, and said, "I hope the presentation isn't too technical for a layman." "Oh, I'm sure I'll manage," I said. Caroline squeezed my hand. "Richard's very intelligent. He was a Navy officer, logistics and operations. He understands complex systems." "Of course," Tanaka-san said, but I could see he'd already dismissed me as irrelevant. Just another American husband, decoration for his wife's professional life. The presentation started at 10 a.m. sharp. Tanaka-san stood at the front of the room, PowerPoint slides behind him, and began speaking. His presentation was actually impressive, I had to admit. He covered the entire acquisition deal, the legal complexities, the regulatory hurdles they'd overcome, the timeline for finalizing everything. He spoke mostly in English, occasionally switching to Japanese when addressing the Tokyo executives. Caroline sat beside me, completely focused on Tanaka-san, her body leaning slightly forward, that look on her face that I recognized. Not professional admiration. Something more. Something intimate. I waited patiently. Halfway through the presentation, Tanaka-san opened the floor for questions. Several Tokyo executives asked questions in Japanese. Tanaka-san answered in Japanese. Nobody bothered translating for the Americans in the room. Caroline looked lost, understanding maybe one word in 10. Then I stood up. The room went quiet. All eyes turned to me. Caroline looked panicked. "Richard, what are you?" I ignored her and spoke directly to Tanaka-san in perfect, formal Japanese. "Tanaka-san, I have a question about the ethical considerations of this deal." The room erupted in murmurs. Tanaka-san's face went white. Caroline grabbed my arm. "Richard, you speak Japanese?" I continued in Japanese, my accent flawless from weeks of practice. "Specifically, I'm curious about how conflicts of interest are handled when attorneys working on the same case are involved in a personal relationship." Tanaka-san tried to recover. He responded in English, his voice shaking slightly. "Mr. Chen, I don't understand your question. There are no conflicts of interest on this deal." I smiled and switched back to English so everyone could understand. "Really? Because I have documented evidence that you and my wife have been having an affair for 3 years. Hotel receipts, emails, videos, photos, hundreds of pieces of evidence showing that you've been sleeping together while working on this deal together." The room exploded. Tokyo executives started talking rapidly in Japanese. American attorneys stood up. Caroline's face went from white to red to white again. She stood up, grabbing my arm harder. "Richard, stop. You're confused. You don't understand." I turned to her and spoke in Japanese, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I understand everything, Caroline. I understood everything Tanaka-san said at our dinner. About how stupid I am. About how oblivious I am. About how you've been having an affair for 3 years, and I suspected nothing." I pulled out my phone and played a video. The dinner conversation from 2 months ago. Tanaka-san's voice crystal clear, saying in Japanese, "What a stupid man. Poor her. Married to such an idiot. He knows nothing while we're doing it." The Tokyo executives watched in horror. One of them, an older man who was clearly senior leadership, stood up and started speaking rapid, angry Japanese at Tanaka-san. I didn't need to translate. The meaning was clear from his tone and body language. Tanaka-san tried to speak, tried to explain, but the senior executive cut him off with a sharp gesture. I turned to Caroline. She was crying now, mascara running down her face. "Richard, please. Can we talk about this privately?" "What?" I asked. "We've kept this private for 3 years. I think it's time for public education." I looked around the room, at all the shocked faces, and spoke clearly. "For anyone who doesn't speak Japanese, let me translate what Tanaka-san said about me at our dinner. He called me a stupid man. He said I was too oblivious to notice my own wife's affair. He said Americans are too trusting, too simple. He laughed about sleeping with my wife while I knew nothing. I pulled out Marcus Webb's investigation report and held it up. This is a professional investigation documenting 3 years of their affair. Hotel visits, emails, phone records, everything. I'm distributing copies to everyone in this room, including all the executives from Tokyo. Caroline lunged for the report, but I stepped back. You call me predictable, Caroline. Simple. Boring. You said I'd probably just suggest marriage counseling if I found out about the affair. You were wrong. I handed the investigation report to the senior Tokyo executive. He took it with a slight bow, his face grim. Then I turned to Patricia Morrison, the senior partner from Caroline's firm, who'd apparently suspected something. Patricia, I believe your firm has policies about attorneys engaging in relationships while working together on cases. I thought you should have documentation of this violation. Patricia took the report, her face a mask of professional fury. Mr. Chen, I appreciate you bringing this to our attention. I turned back to Tanaka-san. He was standing frozen at the front of the room, his presentation forgotten, his career imploding in real time. I spoke to him in Japanese one more time. You thought I was stupid because I didn't speak your language. You thought I was weak because I trusted my wife. You thought you were clever, having an affair right under my nose. But you made one mistake, Tanaka-san. You assumed that because I was quiet, I was powerless. You confused patience with weakness. And now you're going to learn what happens when you underestimate the wrong man. The senior Tokyo executive spoke, his voice cold. Tanaka-san, you're fired. Collect your things and leave immediately. We'll discuss the legal implications of your behavior with our counsel. Caroline's senior partner Patricia spoke next. Caroline, you're suspended pending a full investigation. We'll be in touch about your partnership status. And just like that, it was over. 3 years of lies exposed in 15 minutes. 2 careers destroyed. A marriage ended. All because they'd assumed I was too simple to ever fight back. I walked out of that conference room with my head high. Caroline tried to follow me, crying, begging me to wait, but I kept walking. I'd spent 3 years being the fool. I was done. As I got on the elevator, I saw Tanaka-san being escorted out by security, his face a mask of shame. The Tokyo executives were gathered in a tight circle, speaking in urgent, angry Japanese. Caroline was sitting in a chair, her face in her hands, her career crumbling around her. I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not happiness exactly, but satisfaction. The kind of satisfaction that comes from finally standing up for yourself after being knocked down for so long. When the elevator doors closed, I allowed myself a small smile. My grandfather was right. Language is power, and patience is a weapon. They call me simple. They call me oblivious. They call me boring and predictable and weak. They were right about one thing. I was predictable. I was predictably loyal for 40 years. I was predictably trustworthy. I was predictably patient. But what they didn't predict was that patience has limits. And when those limits are reached, the quiet man becomes the most dangerous man in the room. The drive home from Mitsui's headquarters was the longest 45 minutes of my life. I didn't take Caroline's BMW. I called an Uber, left her there to figure out her own way home, to face the consequences of her choices without me as her safety net. The driver tried to make small talk, but I wasn't in the mood. I just stared out the window at Los Angeles traffic, at the city where I'd built a life with a woman who'd thrown it all away for excitement and sophistication, and someone who made her feel alive. When I got home, I went straight to the garage and sat in my old Ford pickup, the one I'd bought in 1989 and kept running for 35 years because I was too practical to buy something new when the old one still worked. Caroline always hated this truck, called it embarrassing, said it made us look poor when we parked it in front of our nice Craftsman house. I sat there for an hour, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The warning signs I'd missed, the times she'd lied to my face, the nights she'd come home from late work and kissed me goodnight with his taste still on her lips. But mostly I thought about what came next. My phone started ringing. Caroline. I sent it to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. 16 calls in 30 minutes. I finally turned the phone off completely. At 3 p.m., I heard her BMW pull into the driveway. The front door opened. Richard? Richard, please. We need to talk. I stayed in the garage, silent. She found me there 10 minutes later, still sitting in the truck. Her makeup was ruined, her expensive blouse wrinkled, her carefully constructed professional image completely destroyed. She looked small, broken, nothing like the confident attorney who'd walked into that presentation this morning. Richard, please, she said through the truck window. Please let me explain. I rolled down the window, slowly. Explain what, Caroline? Explain 3 years of lies? Explain hundreds of hotel visits? Explain calling me stupid and boring and oblivious while you fucked another man? She flinched at the language. I never swore. Predictable Richard didn't use words like that. But predictable Richard was gone. I never meant for this to happen, she said, the oldest cliché in the cheating spouse handbook. It started and I couldn't stop it. Kenji made me feel things I hadn't felt in years. And I didn't. I asked. 40 years of marriage, and I never made you feel anything? That's not what I mean. She was crying again. You're a good man, Richard. You are. But you're so comfortable. So settled. I felt invisible. Like I was just your wife, not Caroline. Not myself. So you had an affair. I made a terrible mistake. Mistakes are singular, Caroline. You made hundreds of choices over 3 years. Every hotel visit was a choice. Every lie was a choice. Every time you came home and pretended everything was fine was a choice. She slumped against the truck. How long have you known? Since the dinner. When Tanaka-san called me a stupid man in Japanese while sitting at my table, eating my food, fucking my wife. Her face went white. You understood him that night? Every word. I spent 3 years in Japan during my Navy service. Fluent Japanese. But you never asked about my time there, did you? Never cared enough to know that part of my life. You just assumed I was a simple American who couldn't understand sophisticated things like foreign languages. Richard, You call me predictable, I continued. Simple. Boring. You said I'd probably just suggest marriage counseling if I found out. You were wrong. What are you going to do? She asked quietly. I've already called Thomas Whitley, best divorce attorney in Los Angeles. We're meeting tomorrow morning. He's filing papers by end of week. Divorce? Richard, please. Can we try to work this out? Counseling, like you said. I never said that, Caroline. You did. You said that's what boring, predictable Richard would do. But I'm not that man anymore. You killed that man when you chose Tanaka-san over our marriage. I choose you, she said desperately. I'm choosing you right now. Please, Richard. 40 years. That has to mean something. It meant everything to me, I said, but meant nothing to you. You threw it away for hotel sex and someone who made you feel sophisticated. You can't unthrow that away. I got out of the truck, walked past her toward the house. Where will I go? She called after me. That's not my problem anymore. Inside, I went to our bedroom and started packing her things. Clothes in suitcases, jewelry in boxes, personal items in bags. Everything that was hers. I worked methodically, emotionlessly, like I was completing a project at work. Caroline watched from the doorway. You're really doing this? Yes. After everything we've built together, the life we have, the house, the memories. You should have thought about that before you built a different life with someone else. I carried her suitcases downstairs, set them by the front door. I'll come back for the rest tomorrow, I said. Tonight, you need to leave. This is my house too, Richard. I'm not leaving. Actually, it's not. I pulled out a folder from my desk. This house was purchased in 1987, 2 years after we married, entirely with money from my Navy pension and my pharmaceutical sales commissions. California is a community property state, so you're entitled to half its value in the divorce. But you're not entitled to live here anymore. Not after what you've done. You can't just kick me out. Watch me. I opened the front door. You could go to Tanaka-san's place. Oh wait, he's probably not there. He got fired today. Something about violating company policies and bringing shame to the corporation. Maybe you can go to a hotel. The Langham has nice rooms. You know. Her face crumpled. You're being cruel. I'm being honest. For the first time in 3 years, we're both being honest. She looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the moment she realized I meant every word. This wasn't negotiable. This wasn't fixable. This was over. She picked up one suitcase. I'll need help with the rest. Call someone from your firm. Not Tanaka-san, though. He's probably busy explaining to his wife why he's unemployed. Caroline left without another word. I watched her BMW pull out of our driveway, and then I closed the door on 40 years of marriage. The house felt enormous and empty. I walked through it, room by room, seeing everything differently now. The kitchen where we'd cooked together. The living room where we'd watched TV. The bedroom where we'd slept beside each other for decades. All of it tainted now by betrayal. I should have felt sad, broken, but mostly I just felt tired. My phone buzzed. I turned it back on. Text message from Marcus Webb, the private investigator. Saw the news. You did it. Good for you. If you need anything else, call me. News? I opened my laptop and searched Mitsui Corporation, Los Angeles. The first result was from 45 minutes ago. Mitsui executive fired after affair exposed at company presentation. The article had details. Not all of them accurate, but enough. It mentioned Caroline by name, mentioned the 3-year affair, mentioned that I'd exposed them in front of Tokyo executives by speaking Japanese. It quoted anonymous sources saying Tanaka-san had been escorted out by security and his employment terminated immediately. My phone started ringing. Reporters. I didn't answer. Then it buzzed with text messages. Friends who'd seen the news. Neighbors who'd heard gossip. Everyone suddenly wanted to know if I was okay, if the stories were true, if I needed anything. I turned the phone off again. That night, I slept in the guest bedroom. Couldn't bring myself to sleep in the bed Caroline and I had shared. Maybe I'd never sleep there again. Maybe I'd sell this whole house and start over somewhere else. At 68 years old, I still had time to build a new life. A life where I wasn't predictable Richard, the boring husband. Where I was just Richard, whoever that turned out to be. Over the next 3 weeks, the consequences kept unfolding. Tanaka-san's wife Yuki filed for divorce in Tokyo. According to Marcus's sources, she was from a prominent family, and the shame of her husband's public affair had devastated her. The divorce would cost Tanaka-san everything. His reputation, his social standing, and probably most of his assets under Japanese divorce law. Caroline was officially terminated from Patterson and Associates. The firm's investigation found multiple ethics violations, the undisclosed relationship with a colleague on shared cases, potential conflicts of interest, and conduct unbecoming of a partner. Her name was removed from the firm's website. Her office was cleared out. 40-year legal career destroyed. She tried calling me dozens of times those first few weeks. Left voicemails apologizing, explaining, begging for another chance. I listened to exactly none of them. Just deleted them unheard. My divorce attorney, Thomas Whitley, was efficient and ruthless. He filed for divorce on grounds of adultery, which in California doesn't affect property division, but does affect spousal support. Given Caroline's own substantial income and her clear fault in destroying the marriage, Thomas was confident she'd get minimal alimony, if any. She's going to fight this, Thomas warned me. She'll claim you invaded her privacy, that the evidence was obtained illegally, that you humiliated her intentionally. Let her fight, I said. I have 3 years of evidence. I have a professional investigation report. I have her own emails admitting to the affair. What does she have? Desperation, Thomas said. And desperate people make desperate arguments. He was right. Caroline hired her own attorney, some sharp from Century City who immediately filed motions claiming I'd violated wiretapping laws, that I'd invaded her privacy, that the public humiliation had damaged her career and reputation. Thomas shut it all down. California is a one-party consent state for recordings. I had the right to record conversations in my own home. The investigation was legal. And as for public humiliation, Thomas argued that Caroline had brought that on herself by conducting a 3-year affair with a colleague. The divorce moved forward. We sold the Pasadena house. After 37 years there, after building a life in that Craftsman with the big porch and the jacaranda trees, I walked away from it with half the equity and 0 regrets. Caroline got her half too, plus her 401k and her personal property. We split everything 50-50, exactly as California law required. The only thing I fought for was dignity. I wanted it clear in the divorce decree that the marriage ended because of her adultery. I wanted that on paper, forever, part of the public record. Thomas delivered. When the divorce was finalized in October, 5 months after that presentation, the decree explicitly stated the marriage had ended due to Caroline's 3-year extramarital affair. I was officially single for the first time since 1984. It's December now. I'm sitting in a small condo in Santa Monica, 2 bedrooms, ocean view, nothing fancy but mine. All mine. No memories of Caroline here. No ghost of her old life. I've been volunteering at a Navy Veteran Center, helping younger vets transition to civilian life. Turns out my Japanese language skills are useful again. We get a lot of vets who serve in Okinawa, Yokosuka, places I remember from 45 years ago. I help them maintain their language skills, translate documents, navigate VA benefits. It feels good to be useful in a way that has nothing to do with my old life. People ask if I'm angry, if I hate Caroline. Honestly, I don't. Anger requires energy I don't want to spend on her anymore. Hate requires caring, and I don't care anymore. What I feel is indifference. She's part of my past, like my old truck or my old job or my old self. I did see her once, accidentally, at a Starbucks in Westwood. She looked tired, older than her 65 years. She saw me, started to approach, then thought better of it. Just gave me a small, sad wave. I nodded back and left. I heard through mutual friends that she's working as a contract attorney now. No firm will hire her after the scandal. She's making maybe 1/3 of what she used to make. Living in a small apartment in Culver City. Dating someone, I think, but I don't know and don't care. Tanaka-san went back to Japan. His divorce was brutal, cost him most of his assets. He's working a small firm in Sapporo, northern Japan, far from Tokyo and his old life. From what Marcus told me, Tanaka-san's reputation in Japanese legal circles is destroyed. The shame of the public affair followed him. In Japan, you don't recover from that kind of humiliation. I should feel satisfaction about that. And maybe I do a little, but mostly I just feel free. Free from a marriage that had become a lie. Free from being predictable Richard, who was too boring to deserve his wife's fidelity. Free from living a life where I was constantly underestimated and dismissed. My grandfather died when I was 35. Before he passed, he told me something I never understood until now. Richard, he said, the most dangerous thing you can do is underestimate someone because they seem simple. Simple men are often just quiet, and quiet men see everything. He was right. I saw everything. I just waited for the right moment to do something about it. If you're watching this and you've ever been underestimated because you were quiet, because you seemed simple, because someone thought you were too trusting or too boring to fight back, let me tell you something. Patience is not weakness. Silence is not ignorance. And being underestimated is the greatest advantage you can have. Caroline and Tanaka-san thought they were clever. They thought they were sophisticated. They thought they were getting away with something. They were wrong. And by the time they realized how wrong they were, it was too late. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own life, or if you know someone who's being betrayed and doesn't even know it, leave a comment below. Share your experience. You're not alone. And if you learned anything from my story, let it be this. Never confuse kindness with weakness, silence with ignorance, or patience with acceptance. Because the quiet ones are always watching. And eventually, we speak up. Subscribe to this channel for more true stories about dignity, justice, and standing up for yourself when everyone thinks you won't. Your support helps these stories reach people who need them. Thank you for listening to this grandfather story. May you never need to use these lessons, but may you remember them if you do.